To begin with, both The Call of the Wild and To Build a Fire are similar in that they are both about how men and dogs help each other survive. In the in the and Born to Be Wild, in The Call of the Wild, this man is grouped together with a bunch of wolves in order to survive the nature and the cold conditions that he is involved in. For the How to Build the Fire, this man has he has a companion, I would say, which is the dog, the wolf dog to be exact, and they both help each other survive, overcoming circumstances that may come up in the freezing cold weather of the Yukon. The Yukon is always cold, and it is described as being white plains, basically, just throughout miles and miles of land. The imagery that I understood from both of these stories is that it was just nature at its finest, which included snow, trees, and so many things that made it beautiful and stand out to me. Also beautiful but scary as well, because I wouldn't be able to comprehend how to survive in those situations. Like in Call of the Wild, it's difficult to believe that someone could actually survive with wolves and be like the leader of them. That's just something incredible, and it will be amazing to see in real life. And To Build a Fire, the idea of just this is more realistic, and the idea that like humankind has to survive in some of the coldest conditions at times, but now we have more things to work with, as well as like heaters and other things. I know back then they would build a fire. Hence the why that's named the story. The short story is To Build a Fire. But building a fire can always be put out. The plot in these both stories, I would say, was just to survive, the surviving factor. Because in Call of the Wild, the man has to survive in tough conditions of the cold weather, and as well as in How to Build a Fire. To build a fire, he has to survive really cold conditions, and they both could easily be easily lost in these conditions. As like I described, the imagery is just described as snow throughout the land, and it would be difficult to find a way back to civilization without getting lost. The characterization of these both main characters in both stories is that they are described as men that are, I would say, they would try to like survive, basically, which I can't quite think of the word right now, but they were both survivors, although one of them in How to Build To Build a Fire sadly did not make it because the struggles were too much, and it's understandable since the cold weather was there. I think the theme of this story was to be able to survive and companionship. Survival was incredibly difficult in those conditions, in the Yukon conditions, and the mountains, and it's understandable. Like I said, it's understandable. Companionship, I say this because companionship was described in both stories as something they had with a dog or a wolf, but companionship could be different everywhere else, and I really like that part of the stories, is that they describe the idea of companionship, and companionship could be with anyone, and It's really nice to have a companion wherever you go, even if it's not human. Even if they're not human, it's always nice to have someone that will be there and support you just when you're feeling sad and you feel like giving up. Just like the man from How to Build a Fire ended up giving up his last breaths in the cold Rocky Mountains in Yukon. Jack London has always done a good job in characterizing his characters, although two of the biggest characters in both of these stories were dogs. Or, well, yeah, they were dogs, but wolves. In in the Call of the Wild book, one of the characters, which is a wolf, is described like a human being, which is quite surprising to me and quite interesting. Right here it reads, Buck lived at a big house in the sun-kissed Santa Clara Valley. Judge Miller's place, it was called. They stood back from the road, half hidden among the trees, through which glimpse be called the wide, cool veranda that ran around in its four sides. To me, that sounds very personification of the dog. Because later you find out that it was just the dog that he was talking about, which is quite interesting to me. Because right here it says, but Buck was neither a house dog nor a kennel dog, so that's what caught me by surprise, to be honest. Because I honestly expected for it to be a human by the way it was being described, and the characterization of this dog is quite interesting because it shows that although they're not human beings, they still can be described as human beings. And for to build a fire I think the thing that was characterized was nature overall, because the one like I described earlier, nature was characterized because the attributes it had around it, and it was just shown. It was just, I don't know, you could imagine it like without actually seeing it, because it was just characterized in the way that it was the land. Like, I can't really describe it. Let me think. It was characterized in the sense that it seemed like a person, because it was described with the white snow, with all the trees, and I think Jack London did a quite well job doing that. Um, a picture that would relate to both of these stories, I would have to say, is this one. Let me see if I can pull it up. Let's see, higher the brightness. Is this one? It's a little too bright. There it is. It's that one. The reason why I believe that relates to both stories is because it shows companionship, like I described earlier, between human and dog. And companionship, I feel like it was the plot of both stories, because human beings, I feel like they need companionship in order to survive. Doesn't matter if it's another human being, but they just need companionship. Another main theme that I found very interesting about the story was the nature, because they just, for example, one of the stories is literally named "The Call into the Wild," which clearly stating just into the wild, and the other one is to build a fire. Both of these stories describe themes as natural nature, which is not too surprising, since Jack London was into nature, as he was a big activist. He's not a big activist. But he was hugely into nature, as he bought many acres, as we found out. If I had to choose between one of these, which one was my favorite, I would have to say To Build a Fire, because I feel like that one's a little bit more realistic, and to me it just seemed more interesting due to the fact that the the dog was just the dog and the man, as named in the story, seemed to have a really great companionship, and they lived it out into the end. Although sad, it was really a good ending in my opinion. Thank you.